2013, San Francisco Public Library. A brown-haired 29 years old sits in a corner with his laptop. Because of his ordinary look, dressed in casual clothes, he could be a student taking advantage of the public library's Wi-Fi. But not everything is what it seems. His name is Ross, and he is the creator of the biggest black market on the dark web, the Silk Road. A business that has revolutionized drug trafficking and that moves more than $1 billion. Unfortunately for Ross, nothing around him is what it seems. The Arwin couple next to him are FBI agents. The Asian woman sitting behind him, an FBI agent. The entire library is full of undercover FBI agents. Their mission? Take away his laptop before he can react and arrest him. If Ross becomes suspicious, he could shut down the laptop, encrypting the information and throwing off months of investigation that the FBI, DEA, and IRS have worked on. The operation must be executed quickly. Ross William Ulbricht was born in the 1980s in Austin, Texas. He was a Boy Scout and a very good student. He was one of those who always got A's. He even got a scholarship to study physics at the University of Texas. When he finished his degrees, he moved to Pennsylvania to pursue a master's degree in materials science and engineering. It was around this time that something began to stir inside Ross. To begin, he had started exploring psychedelics and became interested in the Eastern philosophy. Also, his work in the lab was becoming heavy, monotonous, and he was beginning to opt for science. But the straw that broke the camel's back was his recent interest in politics, and especially in the libertarian ideas of Ludwig von Mises, an Austrian economist. Von Mises argued, among other things, that once the principle that it is the government's obligation to protect the individual from his own stupidity is admitted, no serious objections can be raised against further limitations. In general, for libertarians who have been intervening in the freedoms or decisions of the individual is one of the biggest problems. That also includes drug use. Von Mises, like other libertarians, argued that the state drug prohibition often opened a Pandora's box of other dangers. An example of this is that while we consume legal drugs such as alcohol, which meet certain standards that depend on regulation, whoever consumes illegal drugs is exposed to contaminated substances, becomes a criminal, and also increases the risk and need to buy them on the black market. Not to mention that, in this context, mafias that act with violence arise. In this case, the prohibition by the state could cause more problems than solutions. And these ideas caught on with Ross as he finished his master's degree, and when he finished it in 2009, he returned to Austin with his girlfriend, Julie Vi. They were very much in love, but soon began to argue. They discussed politics. She was a Democrat. They argued about money, they argued about social life, since she was more of a party person than he was. And to all this, we had to add that Ross had within himself a need to undertake and that he was not doing it well. He tried day trading, but he failed. He tried to open a video game company, but he failed to. He was on a losing streak and his relationship with Julie broke up. Probably what saved him at that time was that a neighbor offered him a job at Wood Wowen's book, a store that sold second-hand books online. Ross created the store's website, learned about logistics, and wrote a script that determined the price of a book based on its rating on Amazon. Ross was a smart man. He was learning along the way, and he mixed what he learned at the bookstore with something he had discovered in his trading days: Bitcoin, the anonymous decentralized currency, and how it fits so well with his libertarian ideas. His creativity soared, and he wrote in his diary, "The idea was to create a website where people could buy anything anonymously, without any trace that could give them away." He called it Underground Brokers, but that wasn't a catchy name, so he changed it to Silk Road. The first thing he needed was a website, and one of the most fascinating things about this story is that Ross wasn't even a programmer by profession. He was learning in a self-taught way. At first, he had the help of a friend who was a software engineer, but he pretty much took care of everything. Silk Road was released in February 2011, when Ross was 26 years old. As a curiosity, one day a well-intentioned hacker showed up and pointed out some vulnerabilities on the web and said, "This is a matter of bullshit," but the thing is, it worked. The second thing he needed was an initial product to sell on the web. Hallucinogenic mushrooms. He grew them himself in a cabin. Third, marketing. He went to the shroomery.org forum and wrote a post posing as a Silk Road customer. I came across this page called Silk Road. It is a hidden service on the Tor network that claims you can buy and sell anything online anonymously. I'm thinking of buying, but I wanted to know if anyone here knows and recommends it. It was simple, classic spam, but it worked. He soon sold all the mushrooms that he had grown. But the real success came when other sellers used the Silk Road to sell their own products. They sold weed, stimulants, benzodiazepines, and any kind of drugs. For each transaction, Silkroad took a commission between 8% and 15%, which would soon give him about $25,000 a month. The losing streak was over. In fact, he even got back together with Julie. Although when he told her what he was getting himself into, she must not have taken it very well, and they soon broke up again. But it didn't matter. Silkroad was growing fast, really fast. One day, a user named Nob introduced himself to Ross as a Puerto Rican drug dealer interested in buying Silkroad. He offered him the amount of $1 billion. Ross rejected it. His response was as follows: "This is more than a business to me. This is a revolution, and it is becoming my life's work." Anyway, that user called Nob, behind whom a Puerto Rican drug dealer was hiding, was the only one he could talk to about the burden of running a place like Silkroad, having a double life, lying and telling people he was engaged in day trading. What he did not know was that behind Nob was actually hiding Karl Mark Force IV, a DEA agent. Silkroad didn't go unnoticed by the US security forces. They started detecting that people were sending drugs through the post, and soon saw that the problem came from a dark web website called Silkroad. DEA agent Karl Force began his investigation by posing as the user Nob, a Puerto Rican drug dealer. But it wasn't just the DEA that was on Ross's trail. In June 2011, the US Senator Charles Schumer called a press conference to denounce the Silkroad website. They were alarmed. The FBI also began to investigate and even aroused the interest of the IRS. The person in charge of the investigation by the FBI was Chris Tarbell, a young agent of those who carry inside, being a policeman. He would wake up at 4:30 in the morning to be in the gym at 5, train, shower and be on his desk by 7 AM. He had a hard time understanding programming, and yet he got a master's degree in computer science, because he knew that was where the future of police investigation would lie. And he went all the way to the FBI Cybercrime Division, and when he brought the Silkroad case to his table, he decided to open an investigation. It was called Operation Onion Pillar. It was the first FBI case in which a website on the Tor network was investigated. To talk about Tor, we first have to talk about the dark web. Let's say that on the internet, all the pages you browse are indexed by search engines. That means that when you search for a page on Google, you get the results because it is indexed. But apart from all pages you browse, there are many others that are not indexed. This is the deep web. Everything that isn't indexed comes in here, from pages protected by a paywall to private emails. But within the deep web, we have something else, the dark web. They are pages that are intentionally hidden from search engines. They use masquerade IP addresses and specific software is required to access them. And that's where Tor, an open source software created by the US Navy, comes in. It is a network that uses a different routing than usual, one that sends the data along a non-direct path, passing through different nodes, calculating a more or less random route. For obvious reasons, we will not go into technical details. The point was that for any investigation, coming across an IP from the Tor network was a headache. Normally, when they came to Tor on an investigation, they assumed that they were at a dead end and gave up. But Agent Tarbell didn't. He said, "I'm going to go after Tor." He formed a group that we'll call the Cyber Squad, of specialized agents for a case like this. Among them were Ilwan Hume, a Bitcoin specialist who had attended the first Bitcoin conference, and Thomas Kiernan, the veteran who understood how all the machines worked, the man who would test the Silkroad's defenses. Since the creation of his great work, things were going well for Ross, at least financially. He spent time in Australia, through some Asian countries. He was what we know today as a digital nomad. This means that he used to work with his laptop, a Samsung 700Z, sitting in coffee shops, tensely, sitting in the corners and turning down the brightness or turning off the screen when someone passed behind him, to make sure no one saw what he was actually doing on the screen. Who knows what could have happened to him if he was arrested in some Asian country, where drug trafficking was punishable by death. Ross had to get used to leading a double life and lying. He used to tell people he knew that he was a day trader. Of course, this need to hide his true vocation forced him to keep relationships superficial. As if that was not enough, as Silkroad grew, he had to face a rather important ethical dilemma. One day he saw that a user wanted to sell heroin. Initially, he had created it to sell hallucinogenic mushrooms, marijuana and cocaine, but it was only a matter of time before heroin arrived. They were big words, but Ross was sold on the free market idea of his. He kept going, but then other things appeared: weapons, poison, organs. Apparently, an email came to Silkroad from a user who wanted to sell kidneys, livers and other parts of the human body. Of course, he added that all these sales would be consensual between buyer and seller, and some users were purists who demanded 100% free market, without restrictions. If heroin could be sold, why not a kidney? Perhaps a family that couldn't afford a liver for their dying son in the US healthcare system would be willing to pay $100,000 to get it on the dark web. Given this situation, Ross had to react. He had to decide what could and couldn't be done. The libertarian experiment needed a guide, a leader. Until then, Ross communicated through the admin user. But this was too important. A leader needed a name. He called himself Dread Pirate Roberts, or DPR, and he wrote a code of conduct: no child pornography, no stolen items, no false titles or identities. He wrote, "Our ground rules are to treat others as you would like to be treated and not to harm or defraud anyone." It was based on the principle of non-aggression. Regarding the user who wanted to sell organs, his response was, according to the official version, yes, if the origin of the organs consents, okay. The creation of the Silk Road led Ross to always debate between what is right and what is wrong. It was curious that one of his favorite series was Breaking Bad, where a chemistry teacher begins with a good intention, earning money for his family, knowing that he has a little time to live. But little by little he makes terrible decisions that turn him into a villain. Leaving ethical dilemmas behind, Silk Road had become the Amazon of the dark web. Each product went with its description and users could rate them, which prevented scams and penalized poor quality products. For example, a user named Ivory observed of an MDMA crystal that it had a nice fizz and whiz of smoke. Meanwhile, Ross returned to the United States, settled in San Francisco in a shared apartment, and returned to spend time with Julie. While his secret business turned into a unicorn, he lived as a normal, happily ordinary young man, unconcerned with, among other things, the apt name he had chosen for the administrator of Silk Road. In the movie The Princess Bride, Red Pirate Roberts is not a single person, but an identity that is passed from one to another when they pass the pirate mask. The choice of that name was a cover. If one day they caught him, if Julio, his programmer friend, betrayed him, he would say that he had created Silk Road, but he had sold it. Thus, the DPR user could have been him at first, but then he would have passed it from admin to admin, like the pirate in The Princess Bride. It was a brilliant idea. He felt invincible. Meanwhile, in New York, in the cybercrime section of the FBI offices, Agent Tarbell and his cyber squad watched a monitor in exaltation. There was a number on the screen, 6275 24620. They had just gotten Silk Road's IP address. 2013, City of Spanish Fork, Utah. Curtis Green was having a Coca-Cola and a handful of mini donuts for breakfast, lying on his sofa. His two chihuahuas accompany him. He hears a noise at the door, looks out the window and sees how a postman runs away. It's weird. He's left a package of the size of an encyclopedia at his door. Curtis goes out to pick it up and notices that in front of his house there is a white van with no logos or windows. That's also weird. He goes back in and closes the door, takes a pair of scissors and cuts a slit in the package. A small wisp of white dust floats towards his face. Suddenly, Curtis hears a bang, the front door falls. He turns and can see the SWAT team with the battering ram that just kicked the door down on him. The armed men enter, knock down and detain Curtis, while the chihuahuas try without much success to defend their owner. They just caught him with a kilogram of cocaine. Back in the van, Curtis begs the agents, "Please don't put me in jail, he knows everything about me. This guy has millions, he could get me killed." Curtis Green had registered on Silk Road under the name of Chronic Pain. He had chosen that name because he was in chronic pain from a back injury he sustained when he worked as a paramedic. He had to take disability leave, so he took advantage of that moment to train and become practically an amateur pharmacist, skills that are more than useful on a website like Silk Road. So, after prior DPR approval, Chronic Pain started the Silk Road Health and Wellness Forum. There he advised on safe drug use, explained how to snort, advised against fentanyl for the uninitiated, and explained that it isn't a good idea to inject heroin into the eyes. One day, DPR texted him, "I want you to know that your work has not gone unnoticed. I'd like to offer you a job." It was a job offer to run customer support. He would also have other jobs, such as changing passwords, and Green accepted. But before giving him the job, DPR required a loyalty test. He asked Curtis to send him a scanned copy of his driver's license. Thus, Curtis would be exposed, while DPR would remain in the shadows. Curtis accepted, and ended up being one of the Silk Road's most loyal workers. A SWAT team entered Curtis' house, accompanied by DEA agents. It was the Marco Polo operation. There were many agencies after Silk Road, and just as the FBI had started the Onion Pillar operation, the DEA had started the Marco Polo operation orchestrated by this man, Karl Mark Force IV, also known as User Nob. the alleged Puerto Rican drug trafficker who spoke to DPR via Torchat. He was the one who had arranged for Curtis to be sent cocaine that day to catch him red-handed. Still, he didn't have to push very hard for Curtis to start talking. Curtis told them that he just wanted to help, that he was a former paramedic, that he thought the package contained another drug called N-bomb. Agent Carl Force gave Curtis his number and told him to call him when he got out of the cell. Meanwhile, Ross had noticed that Chronic Pain was not attending to his job as a customer service manager. He wrote to him to get in touch with him as soon as possible, but he didn't respond. In the end, it was a Google search that revealed that Curtis Green, alias Chronic Pain, was arrested by the DEA. As if that was not enough, he received a message from another of his username workers, Inigo. It turns out that $350,000 worth of Bitcoin were missing from many Silk Road accounts, and Inigo had tracked the transactions down to Curtis Green's accounts. Ross got nervous. They had arrested one of his most loyal workers, and not only he suspected that he could speak, that obviously, by then he had already spoken everything he had to speak, but it turned out that Curtis Green had stolen him. At that moment, he thought about talking to someone who could help him on a sensitive issue like that, and he thought of the Puerto Rican drug trafficker, Nob. He told him that he had a problem in Utah that required violence. He sent him a PDF. It was the driver's license of Curtis Green, who was sitting right in front of him at that moment, because let's remember, Nob was always Agent Karl Mark Force. Nob, do you want me to beat him up, shoot him, or pay him a visit? Dread, I would like him to be beaten up, then force him to return the stolen Bitcoin. I don't really know how these things work. Nob accepted the assignment, so Agent Force, along with another partner, grabbed Curtis Green and made him sign a waiver. They recorded a fake scene in which his head was put in a toilet and drawn to send it to DPR. The thing is, while waiting to hear from Nob, DPR spoke to another user who had helped him with other aspects of the web. His name was Cinnamon. He asked DPR about when a violation against Silk Road would necessitate a lethal response, and this must have made DPR reflect because he wrote to Nob again. Dread. Okay, well, can you change the order to execution instead of torture? He was in there for a while, and now that he's been arrested, I'm afraid he's going to talk. I've never killed a man or ordered it before, but it is the right thing to do in this case. How much will it cost, approximately? Less than 100k? Have you killed or had anyone killed before? Agent Carl Force had talked to DPR for a while and had seen his evolution to this point. Ordering the murder of a person, it was like the story of Walter White in Breaking Bad. Agent Force organized a ruse with his colleagues to fake the death of Curtis Green. They took photos of Curtis on the ground, pale and face down, and sent them to DPR. For the job, he paid $40,000 in advance to an account that was actually controlled by the police. He did not recover the stolen money, but after viewing the photos, he sent the next $40,000. Nob, are you okay? Dread, I hate having to kill him, but what is done is done. New York, FBI office. Agent Chris Darwell looks at the 7-foot blackboard on the wall. It is a visual map that has a server in the center of Iceland, and from which lines come out relating it to different evidence such as IP addresses, proxy servers, or VPNs. One of the connections on the board goes to an IP address. It is the last address to enter the Silk Road VPN. Chris Darwell places a post-it on the board, right next to the IP address, Café Luna, Sacramento Street, San Francisco. The first clue that the FBI Cyber Squad had found was the IP address of Silk Road's real server, a server that was located in Iceland. Agent Darwell traveled to Iceland to the offices of the Thor data center, a data center that harnesses the country's geothermal energy to power the servers. There, the FBI was able to get hold of a copy of the unit that kept a copy of the Silk Road. For obvious reasons, in this channel we cannot enter to assess the technical part of the FBI cyber investigation, but we are going to highlight that the FBI found a computer on that server in the name of Frosty. This is important because the FBI also collaborated with agents from other agencies, and one day in a meeting they were able to speak with Gary Alford from the IRS. It turns out that Gary Alford didn't have the knowledge or the resources of the FBI. The sophisticated research method of his was to search on Google. He searched for when Silk Road was first discussed on the internet and came across a post on the Shroomery.org forum in which a user named Altoid posted a post spamming Silk Road. So he looked for Altoid and found it on other forums. On bitcointalk.org, he had posted a job posting and sent as contact the email rossalbrecht@gmail.com. He had also written a Stack Overflow post with the same email, but the key was that this time he had changed his username to Frosty. Finally, it wasn't the FBI cyber squad who got the key to find the creator of Silk Road, but Gary Alford, an IRS agent. What you may not know is that the IRS is not a law enforcement agency like the FBI or DEA. IRS comes from the acronym Internal Revenue Service. In the end, the person who caught the author of one of the most important libertarian experiments in history was a revenue inspector. No one escapes from revenue. Following the discovery, they found more evidence about Ross. It turns out that a few months earlier, some Homeland Security agents had investigated Ross for a matter of false identity cards, but the matter stopped there. The point is that the FBI, when they looked up his name, discovered that his last residence was a couple of blocks from Café Luna in San Francisco, where they had connected to the Silk Road's VPN. To be sure, they followed him for a few days and could see that when Ross opened his laptop, DPR went online, and when Ross closed the laptop, DPR went offline. They had caught him, they just had to arrest him. And this brings us back to the San Francisco library scene. Ross sits at a secluded table, opens his laptop. He looks like a college boy, but he's not. He is unaware that he is surrounded by undercover FBI agents. Agent Tarbell watches the scene from a distance. He knows they only have one chance. They have to take the laptop when it is unlocked. They cannot let him lock it. The couple behind Ross exert a distraction. The woman yells, "Fuck you," and the man raises his fist as if he is going to hit her. Ross turns in surprise to see the scene. Then another FBI agent who is sitting across from him moves quickly and... Okay, wait, you already know what happened. The FBI operation went well. They managed to get the unlocked laptop and catch Ross. They took him to trial and from there to jail. But there is something we haven't talked about, and it is perhaps more interesting in the story. The stolen money. What about the bitcoins that had been stolen from DPR? Let's remember that DPR had allegedly ordered the murder of Curtis Green when he had disappeared along with $350,000. The question is, had Curtis Green stolen the money? When Agent Carl Force told Curtis that they were gonna have to fake his death, Curtis complained, insisting that he hadn't stolen any money. But Agent Force didn't want to talk about it, rightly so, because he was the one who, after arresting him, had accessed his computer and had stolen the money. He did it in collaboration with another agent, Sean Bridges, of the Secret Service. These two corrupt police officers further modeled the Silk Road case, if that's even possible. The story we have heard so far is the official narrative. I have documented myself mainly in reports from Weird Magazine and other media, but I think it is legitimate to at least refer to other party, because this case has other points of view that can be read at freeross.org. Free Ross Ulbricht is an organization created by Ross's family to spread his version of the story and seek support for Ross. They've gotten more than 500,000 people to plead for mercy for Ross. They tell how his trial and imprisonment are tainted by more corruption than has been talked about. Agents Force and Bridge allegedly blackmailed DPR on more than one occasion. They made him pay up to $80,000 in Bitcoin in exchange for alleged information about the investigation. These agents abused their power, but the key is that this came to light 7 weeks after Ross's trial ended. It turns out that the prosecution knew what was happening with these two agents because they had been investigating them for almost a year, but did everything possible to keep it in secret so that they couldn't skip the trail. And that's how Ross was sentenced to 2 life sentences, plus 40 years in prison for participation in a criminal enterprise, narcotics conspiracy, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and conspiracy to commit computer hacking. Prosecutors also alleged that Ross had ordered the murder of 6 people, but was never charged at trial and came to nothing. In fact, no bodies were ever found, nor was any murder ever proven. The Free Ross organization claims that it was a defamation campaign, based on anonymous chats that were never proven to have been written by Ross. And it should be noted that Curtis Green himself, supposedly the first person ordered to be assassinated by DPR, is in favor of Ross's release and has said so in an interview. And at this point, I have to recommend that if you want to investigate this story, you should look at both the official version and that of Free Ross. So, before clinging to one side, I encourage you to consult different sources, but do not lightly embrace either the official version or the version of the organization without questioning everything first. Subscribe and stay tuned for the next video.